4:30 p.m. on May 11th, 1953. In downtown Waco, Texas, the workday is ending. On the brand new radar screen at Texas A&M, a strange hook-shaped echo appears, an anomaly operators had never seen before. They did not know they were looking at a death sentence for the city. Hidden within the wreckage it left behind was a secret about its true power that would take 70 years to uncover. This is the story of Waco F5. In 1953, Waco was a thriving industrial hub in central Texas with a population of roughly 90,000. Downtown buzzed with commerce. Department stores like Goldstein Miguel and R.T. Dennis Furniture occupied massive multi-story buildings. The 5-story R.T. Dennis building, with its distinctive brick facade, had stood since 1889, a testament to Waco's economic strength. The city had weathered the Great Depression and was experiencing post-war prosperity. Streets were lined with shoppers and workers as businesses prepared to close for the day. Children played in schoolyards and farmers in the surrounding countryside tended their fields. Nobody realized the significance of the strange atmospheric conditions forming above them. Unusually high humidity, a drop in barometric pressure, and an eerie stillness might have been recognized by old-timers as tornado weather, had anyone been paying attention. The date, May 11th, fell squarely within Texas's tornado season, but Waco had no warning system in place. The United States Weather Bureau had only begun issuing tornado alerts 2 years earlier in 1951, and those alerts were broad regional warnings, not the targeted alerts we know today. Weather forecasting remained primitive by modern standards. Meteorologists relied largely on barometers, wind vanes, and visual observation. 60 miles away at Texas A&M University, meteorologist Robert C. Miller was monitoring one of the only weather radars in the region. Developed during World War II primarily for military purposes, weather radar was still in its infancy. The grainy green screen showed precipitation as bright spots, but interpreting these patterns required guesswork more than science. What Miller saw that afternoon was unprecedented, a distinctive hook-shaped echo forming southwest of Waco. This signature, which meteorologists now immediately recognize as the hallmark of a rotating supercell thunderstorm, was a mystery in 1953. Miller noted the anomaly, but he had no framework to understand its deadly implications and no reliable way to warn Waco citizens. As the clock approached 4:30 p.m., the meteorological ingredients for disaster reached their peak. A powerful dry cold front from the Rocky Mountains was colliding with warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico, a classic setup for severe weather in Texas. In the upper atmosphere, wind shear was intensifying, with different wind speeds and directions creating the rotation that would soon spawn a monster. The storm system that developed was a textbook supercell thunderstorm, though meteorologists would not coin that term until years later. These rare, long-lived storms are atmospheric powder kegs, capable of producing the most violent tornadoes. What made this particular supercell so devastating was its timing and location. It would reach maximum intensity precisely as it crossed downtown Waco. At 4:36 p.m., witnesses reported seeing a massive funnel cloud descend from dark skies southwest of downtown. The tornado touched down near 25th Street and Austin Avenue, immediately demolishing homes and businesses. As it moved northeast at approximately 30 miles per hour, the funnel expanded to nearly a half-mile wide, wider than many city blocks. The tornado's path took it directly through Waco's central business district during rush hour. The vortex intensified as it moved, with wind speeds likely exceeding 260 miles per hour, well into the highest category on the Fujita scale that would later be developed. The tornado's power was so extreme that it created a vacuum effect, causing buildings to explode outward rather than collapse inward. Within minutes, the twister ripped through the heart of downtown. The destruction was apocalyptic. The R.T. Dennis building, a 5-story brick structure that had stood for decades, collapsed entirely, crushing everyone inside. The Torrance Recreation Hall, filled with people seeking shelter, crumbled into a mass of twisted steel and concrete. Automobiles were tossed through the air like toys, some landing blocks from where they had been parked. Power lines snapped, transformers exploded, and gas lines ruptured, triggering fires that would burn for hours. The tornado continued its northeast trajectory, tearing through residential neighborhoods before finally lifting near the Brazos River. Its path on the ground lasted just 23 minutes, but in that brief span it destroyed over 600 buildings and damaged hundreds more. The toll was 114 people dead, nearly 600 injured, and economic damage that would exceed $41 million, equivalent to roughly $450 million today. The accounts of survivors paint a vivid picture of the terror that unfolded that May afternoon. Walter Bergman, a 43-year-old salesman, was working late in the Dennis building when he felt a sudden drop in air pressure that made his ears pop. The building seemed to breathe in and out, he later recalled. Then the windows blew in and everything went dark. Bergman survived by diving under a heavy desk, though he spent hours trapped in the rubble before rescuers found him. Eleanor Martinez, a 17-year-old waitress at a downtown diner, described the tornado's approach. It wasn't like they say, there was no freight train sound. It was more like a giant vacuum cleaner, sucking everything up. The air itself seemed to disappear. Martinez survived by taking shelter in the diner's walk-in freezer, emerging to find the rest of the building gone. Police officer Raymond Botts was directing traffic when the storm hit. One minute I was standing on the corner of 5th and Austin. The next I was hanging onto a light pole for dear life, he said in a newspaper interview days later. I watched a Cadillac lift off the ground and fly through a second-story window across the street. No man should see such things. Perhaps the most chilling accounts came from those who witnessed the collapse of the Dennis building. Mary Wilson, a secretary in a law office across the street, described how it didn't fall over. It just seemed to disintegrate, floor by floor, like a deck of cards being shuffled. The building's collapse alone killed 30 people, more than a quarter of the tornado's total victims. Weather observers at the time were equally stunned. The Waco weather station, which survived the tornado, recorded a barometric pressure drop so severe that some initially believed the equipment was malfunctioning. Later analysis suggested the pressure at the tornado's center may have been comparable to that of a Category 5 hurricane, creating an explosive decompression effect inside buildings. Radio broadcaster Harry Maylander of KWTX was on air when the tornado hit. His live broadcast, preserved in archives, captures the moment of realization. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking out our studio window and I see, my God, it's a tornado. A huge tornado is crossing the river. If you can hear me, take cover immediately. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not... The broadcast cut off as the station lost power. Newspaper accounts in the days that followed described a city on its knees. The Dallas Morning News ran the headline, "Waco resembles bombed city," alongside photos of block after block of flattened buildings. Time magazine called it Texas' worst twister, a designation that remains accurate today in terms of single tornado fatalities in the state. The immediate response to the disaster was hampered by the very scale of destruction. Emergency services were overwhelmed within minutes. Ambulances could not navigate debris-filled streets, and many of the city's medical facilities had themselves been damaged. The lack of emergency planning for such a catastrophe became painfully apparent. Mayor Ralph Wolf, who had been in office less than a month, found himself coordinating a massive rescue operation. He later described those first hours as organised chaos. The city's police and fire departments were quickly reinforced by volunteers, many of whom had themselves lost homes or businesses. By nightfall, Governor Alan Shivers had declared a state of emergency and activated the Texas National Guard. More than 500 guardsmen arrived to assist with rescue efforts, maintain order, and prevent looting. The Red Cross established emergency shelters in schools and churches, that had been spared by the tornado. The rescue operation continued for days. Survivors were pulled from the rubble as late as Thursday morning, nearly 40 hours after the tornado struck. The Dennis building proved especially challenging, its collapsed floors forming a deadly maze that rescue workers had to navigate carefully. Doctors performed emergency surgeries by flashlight in makeshift field hospitals. Federal assistance came from President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who authorized disaster relief funds and sent personnel from the newly formed Civil Defense Administration. This marked one of the first major deployments of federal disaster resources in peacetime, establishing precedents that would evolve into today's FEMA protocols. The scientific response was equally significant. The US Weather Bureau dispatched a team of meteorologists to study the tornado's effects. Among them was a young Japanese-American researcher named Tetsuya Ted Fujita, who would later develop the F-scale for measuring tornado intensity based partly on what he observed in Waco. Fujita's detailed analysis of the damage patterns revealed something unprecedented: evidence of multiple vortices within the main tornado, spinning at speeds far greater than the parent funnel. This discovery fundamentally changed understanding of tornado dynamics. The Waco tornado was not just powerful, it was complex in ways that challenged existing meteorological models. The Waco tornado fundamentally changed how America deals with severe weather. Within months, the Weather Bureau began developing a more comprehensive tornado warning system. The disaster highlighted the critical need for rapid communication between weather observers and the public, a gap that would eventually be filled by weather radios, emergency broadcast systems, and today's smartphone alerts. The scientific legacy is equally profound. That strange hook echo on Texas A&M's radar screen became a standard identifier for potentially tornadic storms. Meteorologists studied it intensively, eventually developing the modern concept of the mesocyclone, the rotating updraft that produces the most violent tornadoes. Fujita's work in Waco directly influenced his creation of the Fujita scale in 1971, giving scientists a standardized way to measure tornado intensity based on damage patterns. When the enhanced Fujita scale replaced it in 2007, many of the modifications were based on continued analysis of historical events like Waco. Architecturally, the disaster changed building codes throughout Tornado Alley. Engineers studying the collapse of Waco's structures identified critical weaknesses in how buildings of that era were constructed. Modern tornado-resistant designs incorporate many lessons learned from those failures, including improved connections between walls and foundations, and stronger roof-to-wall ties. For Waco itself, the tornado marked a turning point. The city rebuilt, but its downtown never fully recovered the vibrant commercial character it had before May 11, 1953. Many businesses relocated to the suburbs, accelerating a pattern of urban decline that would affect cities across America in the following decades. Today, a granite memorial stands in downtown Waco, listing the names of all 114 victims. The site of the Dennis building remained vacant for decades, a scar in the urban landscape that some called Waco's Ground Zero. In 2011, nearly 60 years after the disaster, a memorial park finally opened on the site. Perhaps the most remarkable legacy emerged only in recent years. In 2023, meteorologists using advanced computer modelling revisited the original data from the Waco tornado. Their shocking conclusion: the 1953 storm may have produced wind speeds approaching 300 miles per hour in its multiple vortices, making it potentially one of the most intense tornadoes ever recorded. The hook echo that puzzled observers 70 years ago had concealed a monster of nearly unimaginable power. The Waco tornado stands as a watershed moment in American weather history, a disaster that forced the nation to confront its vulnerability to nature's fury and sparked innovations that continue to save lives today. Every tornado warning issued, every weather radar scan, and every severe storm shelter built carries within it the echo of what happened in those terrifying 23 minutes in Waco, Texas. Subscribe to Tornado Attacks for more historical storm investigations. Hit the notification bell to be the first to see our upcoming feature on the tri-state tornado of 1925. Share this video with anyone fascinated by extreme weather or American history, and leave a comment with your thoughts or questions. Nature's power demands our respect. Understanding is our best defense.